Welcome to another episode of Millennial Investing Explained. Here's today's question. What other common misconceptions around behavioral finance or just human psychology around money are in the world today?
I think one of the most common in the, we'll call it the personal finance investing social media world is sort of one that lacks compassion, which is just a lack of understanding that most families just don't have any money to invest. There's a lot of families that are just squeaking by. And the fact that we can even talk about these things or worry about these things is quite a privilege. And so I think the accompanying advice there is the best investment that you can make is in yourself. The best investment you could ever make is in your education, your skills, your connections, because it's only as you earn money that you have any money to invest or save. Because for the majority even of American families, even in the richest country on earth, more than half of Americans are not saving any appreciable amount of money. And so that's the place to start. Another one that's really pervasive is, what we'll call the latte factor, which is this idea that, you need to be cutting out coffee or whatever. And I mean, that stuff certainly adds up. But the thing to worry about first is the big rocks. Most people who have really burdensome debt, it's from college, cars, and homes. If you can keep your house in check, if you can drive a car that gets you from point A to point B, and if you can go, to a junior college for a couple of years or not go to that out-of-state college, keep those college costs in check, you're going to be a long way towards financial success because it takes a lot of lattes to afford 4 or 5 years at an out-of-state school.
Yeah, that last one is so interesting to me. And I think Ramit Sethi was the first one that brought it to my attention. And since then, Scott Trench from Bigger Pockets as well. But they both talk about that idea of your housing and your car is a lot of money. If your car is $300 and your latte is $3 a day, it takes a lot of lattes to replace that car or your mortgage or whatever it is. So definitely, you got to look at those bigger things before you start worrying about something as small as a latte.
Well, I mean, I used to work at a private school where the tuition was about $55,000 a year, to say nothing of the living expenses required to live in a major American city, call it 10 or 15 grand conservatively for, living expenses. And you're staring down a $300,000 bill after you graduate with your bachelor's in Renaissance jewelry studies or whatever. So, I mean, it's very, very tricky. So those things are big. And unfortunately, when we're considering them, our brains aren't even fully formed. When folks are making these decisions about whether or not to get a credit card in college or what major to study or what school to go to. I mean, scientists now know that your prefrontal cortex isn't even all there yet. And so we're making big decisions about our financial future with sort of a cognitive deficit. So it's a tricky thing that I have a lot of empathy for.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot of times from people I've talked to and just experiences I've had, people often feel worse spending that $3 a day or even a couple times a week on a coffee than they do at first when they spend college. If they're in college, they're not even really realizing, they don't feel bad about spending that $55,000 a year. Whereas if money starts to get a little tight and they're still buying their lattes, they start to feel bad about that. So it's a really interesting dynamic that's played with human psychology.
It's back to this concept of salience that I touched on earlier. That latte is very salient, right? It feels like a splurge. You do it, anywhere from daily to periodically, but it feels like a splurge. It's advertised as a splurge. My wife and I talk about this all the time because she's the more frugal of the two of us. And she'll say things like, oh, we shouldn't go out to eat so much. We should not go on so many vacations or not go out to eat so much. And, I'll kind of show her the math and say, look, if we really want to save money, the thing that we should do is move to Tennessee or Florida. We live in Atlanta and there's no state income tax. One state north and one state south, there's no income tax. That would save us an order of magnitude more money than cutting out, an out to eat once a week. And so some of these things can feel like a big splurge when in reality, they're not that big of a deal. But things like, your geography is huge. Your geography is huge from a cost of living standpoint, from a taxation standpoint, and some things like that, which may not be as immediately salient, people would be really wise to think about the tax profile of the state they choose to live in, or, the cost of housing in their metro, and, go live in Iowa and get Starbucks every day and be happy as a clam.
Those two are such good examples because if you were to move from Atlanta to a state that had no income tax, and you were in a city that you liked, you had friends and family around just like you do in Atlanta, ultimately, you're probably going to be just as happy in Atlanta as you are in your new city. So your happiness and your overall well-being isn't changing much. But if you go and cut all of your vacations, that's something you really enjoy. And by cutting those, yeah, you might be able to save some money, but you're not going to be as happy.
It brings up a great point about how to spend money for happiness too. And there's great research on this. The research tells us if you want to buy happiness, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can spend time with people you love. So, going on that vacation, buy your way out of things you don't love. So, getting someone to mow your lawn or clean your house or cook dinner, go out to eat. That's another way. And then you can spend it on other people. You can give generously to charity. You can treat your friends to something. So that's about it.
That's all for this episode of Millennial Investing Explained. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to get even more free content.